The first time Diane Holbrook saw someone drinking her ranch water was at 2:17 p.m. on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. She froze at her kitchen window, knuckles wet round the sponge in her hand as Margaret Keller, better known throughout Sycamore Heights as Hey Karen, lifted the glass from Diane's patio table and took a long, satisfied sip. "Unbelievable," Diane whispered, watching as Margaret placed the glass back down and continued her self-appointed inspection of Diane's backyard. The woman moved with purpose, her crisp linen pantsuit somehow unwrinkled despite the 94-degree heat, a clipboard clutched against her chest like a medieval shield. Margaret Keller had been president of the Sycamore Heights Homeowners Association for 8 consecutive years, not because anyone particularly wanted her there, but because no one else wanted the job enough to challenge her. Her regulation-length salt and pepper bob swung decisively as she made notes about Diane's garden gnome, undoubtedly violating some obscure bylaw added during last month's meeting. Diane had missed that meeting. She'd been busy dealing with the aftermath of her divorce. The woman's audacity was astounding. Not only was she trespassing to conduct an unsanctioned inspection, but she was helping herself to Diane's carefully crafted ranch water. Fresh lime, Topo Chico, and the good tequila she only broke out for special occasions. Today's special occasion had been making it to noon without crying. Later that evening, Diane found the citation slipped under her door, violation. Unapproved lawn ornament exceeding height restriction. Section 7.3, garden gnome must be removed within 48 hours. The gall of it burned in Diane's chest. She bought the gnome with her 13-year-old daughter Emma after the divorce was finalized, a small, silly attempt at starting new traditions in their downsized life. The following day, Margaret was back, this time with a tape measure. And once again, while Diane watched through her blinds, the woman helped herself to the fresh ranch water Diane had deliberately left as bait. By the 5th consecutive day of Margaret's inspections and beverage theft, Diane had had enough. She paced her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "I'm telling you, Jen, she's doing it on purpose," Diane said to her sister. "She knows I'm home. She wants me to confront her. So why don't you?" Jennifer asked. Diane sighed. "Because she's looking for any excuse to make my life harder. I already have 3 citations this month. If I get 5, they can impose special assessments. Then document. Film her trespassing and stealing your drinks." Diane paused her pacing. "Actually, I have a better idea." The next morning, Diane prepared her ranch water with a special ingredient, one that would teach Margaret Keller a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. Diane's plan began with a trip to the pharmacy. As she browsed the digestive health aisle, she felt a strange mix of guilt and anticipation. The bottle of extra-strength laxative felt unexpectedly heavy in her hand, like it contained more than just medication, but a moral decision. She hesitated only briefly before dropping it into her basket alongside a new bottle of tequila. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Emma asked as they drove home, eyeing the pharmacy bag skeptically. At 13, she possessed both the righteousness of youth and the pragmatism of a child of divorce. "Honey, sometimes adults have to handle things creatively," Diane replied, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel at a red light. "Besides, I'm not forcing her to drink it. She's stealing from us." Emma smirked. "The HOA handbook probably doesn't have rules against laxatives in your own drinks." "Exactly," Diane said, though the justification rang hollow even to her own ears. Back home, Diane prepared her trap. 3 tablespoons of the clear, tasteless laxative mixed into the ranch water, enough to ensure a memorable experience without causing genuine harm. She positioned the glass in its usual spot on the patio table, retreated inside, and waited behind her kitchen blinds with her phone camera ready. Margaret arrived at precisely 2:15 p.m., punctual in her tyranny. Today she wore a navy pantsuit with a silk scarf tied at her neck despite the heat, her clipboard clutched in her manicured grip. She made a show of inspecting Diane's flower beds, running her finger along the fence line checking for dust and measuring the height of the recently relocated garden gnome. Then, right on cue, she approached the patio table. Diane held her breath, phone recording, as Margaret glanced furtively toward the house before lifting the glass to her lips. 1 sip. 2. Then, to Diane's horror, Margaret drained the entire glass. "Oh God," Diane whispered. 3 tablespoons was meant for sipping, not chugging. What happened next occurred with such unexpected swiftness that Diane nearly dropped her phone. As Margaret set down the empty glass, a familiar SUV pulled into Diane's driveway. It was Ryan, Diane's ex-husband, arriving early to pick up Emma for his weekend visitation. Margaret, startled by the car's arrival, quickly straightened her scarf and adopted the authoritative posture that had intimidated countless neighbors. Ryan, oblivious to what he just interrupted, approached with his usual forced cheerfulness. "Hello there," he called to Margaret. "You must be from the HOA." Margaret's smile was tight. "Margaret Keller, president of the Sycamore Heights Association. I was just completing a routine compliance check on the property." Ryan nodded, his eyes darting uncomfortably between the house and Margaret. Great, great. I'm just here to pick up my daughter. Diane watched in growing panic as Ryan invited Margaret to join them at the front door. This was not part of the plan. Now Ryan was knocking and Emma was answering and Margaret was still standing there, clipboard pressed against her stomach, the laxative quietly beginning its work within her system. The countdown had begun. Diane rushed to the front door, smoothing her hair and composing her face into what she hoped was a neutral expression. The sight that greeted her was like something from a sitcom. Emma slouched against the doorframe, Ryan shifting awkwardly from foot to foot, and Margaret standing rigidly with her clipboard, all three waiting in uncomfortable silence. "Ryan, you're early," Diane said, shooting Emma a warning glance. Her daughter's eyes sparkled with barely contained mischief. "Traffic was light," Ryan shrugged. "I was just chatting with Ms. Keller here about the neighborhood." Margaret's smile remained fixed, but Diane noticed a fine sheen of sweat forming along her hairline. "Mrs. Holbrook, I've completed my inspection and found several violations that require immediate attention." Her voice was tight, her words coming faster than usual. "Oh," Diane feigned innocence. "Maybe we should discuss this another time when." "Your garden gnome exceeds the height restriction by 2 inches. Margaret pressed on. "Your mailbox needs repainting, and there are unapproved plant species in your front beds. Additionally," she paused, pressing a hand briefly against her stomach before recovering. "Additionally, your garbage cans were visible from the street on Tuesday." Ryan cleared his throat. "Well, we should probably get going, Emma. Your grandmother's expecting us for dinner." Emma looked between her mother and Margaret, clearly reluctant to miss whatever was about to unfold. "Can't we stay just a few more minutes?" "Now, Emma," Ryan insisted. As Emma trudged to collect her overnight bag, Margaret's posture subtly changed. She shifted her weight, pressing her thighs together almost imperceptibly. Diane recognized the universal body language of someone desperately trying to hold it together. "Perhaps I should be going as well," Margaret said, her voice suddenly strained. "But we haven't finished discussing my violations," Diane replied sweetly. "I'm particularly interested in this unapproved plant species. Could you show me exactly which ones are problematic?" Margaret's eyes widened slightly, panic flickering across her face. "I can email you the details." "I'd really prefer to see them now while you're here," Diane insisted, gesturing toward her garden. "It'll only take a minute." Ryan returned with Emma, overnight bag in tow. "All set," he announced, oblivious to the tension. Margaret's facade was crumbling by the second. She took a small step backward, then froze. A faint gurgling sound emanated from her midsection, audible in the awkward silence. Emma stifled a giggle. "I really must go," Margaret said, her voice now desperate. "Urgent HOA business." She turned abruptly, then stopped again, doubling slightly at the waist. "Are you feeling all right, Margaret?" Diane asked, her concern convincingly genuine. "Fine," Margaret gasped, straightening with visible effort. "Just remembered another appointment." She began walking stiffly toward her car, her usual measured gait replaced by something more urgent. Halfway down the driveway, she quickened her pace, almost breaking into a run. "What's with her?" Ryan asked, watching Margaret fumble with her car keys. "Probably something she drank," Diane replied innocently. The weekend passed with blessed silence from the HOA. Diane spent Saturday deep cleaning the house, a ritual that always helped clear her mind, and Sunday catching up on work emails. By Monday morning, she had almost convinced herself that the Margaret situation had resolved itself. Perhaps the woman had learned her lesson and would leave Diane alone. That delusion shattered at precisely 9:47 a.m. when Diane's phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. "Hello, this is Diane," she answered, wedging the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued typing at her laptop. "Mrs. Holbrook." The voice was male, formal, and instantly concerning. "This is Charles Whitman, attorney for the Sycamore Heights Homeowners Association. I'm calling regarding a rather serious incident that occurred on your property last Friday." Diane's fingers froze over her keyboard. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." "Mrs. Keller experienced a severe medical episode after visiting your residence. She believes she was deliberately poisoned." The accusation hung in the air. Diane's throat went dry. "That's ridiculous," she managed. "Margaret was trespassing on my property conducting an unauthorized inspection. Whatever happened to her afterward is hardly my responsibility." "She was performing her duties as HOA president," the attorney countered smoothly, "and she has reason to believe you tampered with a beverage that you knew she would consume." Diane's pulse quickened. "Are you suggesting I predicted she would drink something from my patio table? Something that belonged to me?" "Mrs. Keller has submitted video evidence of your pattern of leaving beverages in the same location during her previous visits." Ice formed in Diane's stomach. Margaret had been documenting her visits too. "Mr. Whitman," Diane said carefully, "I occasionally enjoy a drink on my patio. I'm not responsible for what happens when someone trespasses on my property and helps themselves to my personal belongings without permission. Be that as it may, he continued, Mrs. Keller spent several hours in the emergency room and has medical bills exceeding $3,000. She's prepared to pursue this matter legally unless an alternative resolution can be reached. There was the shakedown. What alternative did you have in mind? Diane asked, already knowing the answer would hurt. Mrs. Keller is willing to consider the matter closed if you withdraw your recent architectural modification request for the backyard pergola and agree to serve on the beautification committee for the next 2 years. The pergola. Of course. One home improvement project Diane had planned to create a functional outdoor space where she and Emma could spend time together. The project she'd saved for months to fund. The committee meets every Tuesday evening at 7, Whitman added, twisting the knife. Mrs. Keller chairs those meetings personally. Diane closed her eyes, imagining 2 years of Tuesday evenings under Margaret's thumb. The alternative, potential legal action, regardless of how dubious, would drain her already strained finances. I'll need time to consider, she said finally. Of course, Mrs. Keller expects your answer by end of day tomorrow. The call ended, and with it, Diane's momentary victory. Diane did what any rational adult would do after receiving a legal threat. She poured herself a glass of wine at 10:30 in the morning and called her sister. She what? Jennifer's voice crackled through the speaker. She's threatening to sue you because she stole your drink. Apparently, Diane said, taking another sip. And she has video evidence of me leaving drinks out, which apparently proves intent. That's absurd. You got video of her trespassing and stealing. Call her bluff. Diane paced her kitchen. I can't afford a legal battle, Jen. Not now. So what, you're just going to give up your pergola plans and spend the next 2 years being Margaret's committee puppet? The question stung because Diane had, in fact, been considering exactly that. The path of least resistance. It was what she'd done throughout her marriage. Compromise, accommodate, surrender, until there was nothing left of herself to give. No, she said finally. I need a different solution. That solution came from an unexpected source. Emma's FaceTime call that evening was a welcome distraction, though her daughter's bedroom at Ryan's house formed a backdrop that still felt like a stab to Diane's heart. So she's trying to blackmail you? Emma asked after Diane explained the situation. That's literally criminal. It's complicated, honey. No, it's not, Emma insisted. Dad always says you need leverage in negotiations. Diane suppressed an eye roll at her ex's negotiation tactics. I don't have leverage, Em. That's the problem. But you do, Emma said, her voice dropping to a whisper as she glanced off camera to ensure no one was listening. Remember Mr. Davis from 3 houses down? He told Dad that Margaret approved his pool installation because he's doing free accounting for her side business. Diane frowned. What side business? She sells those essential oil things. Multi-level marketing stuff. Mr. Davis said she's using the HOA email list to recruit people, which is like super against the rules. A spark of possibility ignited in Diane's mind. Are you sure about this? Emma nodded emphatically. Dad and Mr. Davis were talking about it at the barbecue last month. They said everyone knows, but nobody wants to deal with her. After saying goodnight to Emma, Diane opened her laptop and began searching. Sure enough, buried in the HOA bylaws was Section 12.4. Association resources, including but not limited to membership contact information, shall not be used for commercial purposes or personal gain by any board member. Further digging through her email archives revealed 3 separate messages from Margaret over the past year, each with a personalized invitation to join her wellness journey with ethereal essentials. The most recent had come through the official HOA announcement system. Diane leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. For the first time in days, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. The next morning, she called Charles Whitman. I considered Mrs. Keller's proposal, she said coolly. And I have a counter-proposal I believe she'll find compelling. The Sycamore Heights HOA boardroom, actually just the community center's multipurpose room with a long folding table, felt unusually tense that Thursday evening. Diane sat calmly at one end, a manila folder placed precisely in front of her. Margaret occupied the chair at the opposite end, her usual confidence noticeably diminished. Between them sat Charles Whitman, looking uncomfortable in the metal folding chair, and 3 bewildered board members who had been summoned to this emergency executive session without explanation. I appreciate everyone making time for this meeting, Margaret began, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to controlling rooms. We have a sensitive matter involving a resident that requires immediate. Actually, Diane interrupted, I requested this meeting to address concerns about leadership conduct. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Mr. Whitman is here regarding your conduct, Mrs. Holbrook. Diane smiled pleasantly. Yes, Charles and I had a productive conversation yesterday. He's been most helpful in understanding the legal ramifications of certain actions. The attorney shifted in his seat, tugging at his collar. "What's this about?" asked Gloria Peterson, the board treasurer, glancing between the two women. Diane opened her folder. "I've discovered that our HOA president has been using association resources for her personal business ventures, specifically to promote and recruit for Ethereal Essentials, her multi-level marketing enterprise." She slid copies of emails across the table, each bearing the official HOA letterhead and Margaret's signature, each containing sales pitches for essential oil packages and business opportunities. Section 12.4 of our bylaws explicitly prohibits this, Diane continued. Additionally, I have evidence of Mrs. Keller conducting unauthorized property inspections, trespassing, and most concerningly, consuming beverages from residents' properties without permission. At this, Diane produced her phone and played the video of Margaret drinking from her patio glass. The board members watched in stunned silence. "These are defamatory accusations," Margaret sputtered, her face flushing. "Mr. Whitman, explain the legal consequences she's facing." The attorney cleared his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Keller, after reviewing the evidence Mrs. Holbrook presented, I advised you yesterday that pursuing the matter further would expose the association to significant liability." Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. "You weren't for me, for the HOA." "Precisely," Whitman replied. "My obligation is to the association, not to any individual member, and continuing this dispute would not serve the association's interests." Gloria Peterson leaned forward. "Margaret, have you been using our membership list for your oil business?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "I'm not suggesting we take punitive action," Diane said, her voice measured. "I simply request that my pergola plans be approved as submitted, that all recent citations against my property be rescinded, and that Mrs. Keller agree to certain boundaries going forward." Margaret's expression hardened. "This is blackmail." "I prefer to call it negotiation," Diane replied. "And before you respond, you should know I've prepared a full presentation for the general membership meeting next week. I'd be happy to shelve it permanently." The power in the room had shifted, and everyone knew it. The next week unfolded with a surreal sense of calm. Diane's pergola plans received unanimous board approval, minus Margaret's abstention, and construction was scheduled to begin the following month. The violation notices disappeared from her file. Most surprisingly, Margaret herself seemed to vanish from the neighborhood radar. No clipboard inspections, no passive-aggressive emails, no Margaret. On Wednesday afternoon, as Diane worked from home, a notification from her doorbell camera interrupted her focus. She expected a package delivery, but instead found Gloria Peterson standing on her porch looking hesitant. "Gloria, hi," Diane greeted her, opening the door. "Is everything okay?" The treasurer's expression was grave. "Can we talk for a minute?" Inside, over hastily prepared coffee, Gloria got straight to the point. "Margaret resigned from the board last night. Sent an email to all of us at midnight." Diane's eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected." "Is it?" Gloria gave her a knowing look. "After what you revealed, her position was untenable. But that's not why I'm here." She hesitated. "The thing is, the board wants to know if you consider filling her position." The coffee mug paused halfway to Diane's lips. "Me? Why?" "You clearly understand the bylaws better than most of us. You stood up to Margaret when no one else would, and you did it without destroying the association in the process. That shows judgment." Gloria sipped her coffee. "Plus, you're the only one with a backbone who hasn't already refused the job." Diane set down her mug. "I appreciate the offer, but I've just gone through a divorce. I'm rebuilding my life, and I have Emma to think about. Taking on HOA drama isn't exactly on my priority list." "That's exactly why you should do it," Gloria insisted. "This neighborhood needs someone who sees the HOA as what it should be, a way to maintain our community, not control it." Margaret turned it into her personal kingdom. Diane thought about Emma, about the garden gnome they'd bought together, about the pergola where they would spend summer evenings. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Gloria nodded, satisfied. "That's all I ask." After Gloria left, Diane found herself drawn to the backyard, imagining the pergola that would soon transform the empty space. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad says I can come home a day early this weekend. Can we have movie night Friday?" The simple question brought unexpected tears to Diane's eyes. Home. Despite everything, the divorce, the downsizing, the HOA battles, Emma still called this place home. As Diane typed her reply, movement across the fence caught her eye. Sylvia Chen, her elderly neighbor, was struggling with a heavy bag of mulch. Without hesitation, Diane pocketed her phone and headed next door. "Let me help you with that," she called, lifting the fence latch. Sylvia straightened, pressing a hand to her lower back. "Diane, thank you. These bags get heavier every year." "Or we get a little older," Diane smiled, hefting the bag. "Where do you want it?" As they worked together on Sylvia's garden, the conversation flowed easily between them. Diane learned that Sylvia had lived in Sycamore Heights for 23 years, had served on the original AHO board, and made the best lemon bars in the county. You know, Sylvia said as they finished, this neighborhood used to be different. People looked out for each other.